Hello, Jim Townsend here. You can get my website at townsend.v. I wanted to make a little video about the oil and gas industry and monopolies. I know that sometimes reality is vastly different than the perception that we're fed of reality by the propaganda industry. We know that a certain group of people own all of the media in North America, and their perception of what they want you to believe is generally the perception that people have. I got out of a miserable group home on my 16th birthday and had no idea where I was going or anything else about life. I never got an education in there or anything else. It was funny, I was a ward of the courts under the Protection of the Children's Act, but it was under there that I was under attack more than anything else. Well, anybody that's ever been into that system knows what it is and what a big fraud it is, as are most systems. I spent a couple of years hitchhiking around North America, and I met a lot of interesting people and saw a lot of interesting things. Coming back across Canada, I ended up in Alberta, and I managed to get a job in Alberta as a steeplejack, and which is a high rigger. Basically a job that nobody else wanted, so I got paid really good money. I just did things like painting sulfur stacks and flare stacks and rigging stacks, and I learned a lot of different trades because a lot of people were too scared to go off the ground, so they'd explain to me what needed to be done and I'd go up and do it. Eventually got into sandblasting and spray painting, and then I got a job out in eastern Alberta, western Saskatchewan, sandblasting pump jacks and spray painting pump jacks and wellheads. And one thing I noticed while I was out there doing it all was that they were capping off all of these wellheads. So I said to the guy, why are they drilling all these wells? They're just capping them off. What's with that? And he said, oh, well, we don't really need this. This is all sweet gas. It comes out of the ground. It almost doesn't need to be processed. He says, right now we're taking all of the gas out of western Alberta, which is highly sulfuric. It's H2S gas. They extract all the sulfur out of it, and it's a little bit more expensive to get it out. So they wanted to get all that out and leave that good gas in there. He says there's enough oil and gas in Alberta to run all of North America for the next 100 years. We won't even have to get into this, right? And that was kind of funny because it was kind of in the middle of an oil crisis, and he just laughed and he said there's no such thing. And I often wondered about that, and subsequently came to believe it because I worked in a lot of gas plants around Alberta, different turnarounds and everything. And as I said, I've had a lot of different jobs. I've always tried to improve myself. When I was hitchhiking around North America, I hid in libraries. Libraries were a wonderful place to go. You could sleep inside in the warmth during the day and then walk around at night rather than laying there in a sleeping bag shivering, and the cops didn't kick your ass and all that other sort of stuff and tell you to move along. So I suppose I cracked a few books and learned how to read a few things. Well, I got into programming. Got into building artificially intelligent software. I was just fascinated with it. I spent a significant amount of time playing on the internet, ARPANET, and particle data groups and things like that. Had interest in quantum physics, my dog there, particle mechanics and stuff like that. So I got into computers, and I became very interested in artificial intelligence. And I got a lot of good jobs as a consequence of that. Like I said, I wrote quite a few financial applications for banks and insurance companies. I wrote quite a few SCADA applications for oil and gas companies. And then one job I got was to go down to the U.S., to Wichita, Kansas, and work for Koch Oil and Gas. I got hired as a technical expert for a programming group, and while I was down there, I got shown another application on their pipeline control center and asked if I could write an artificial an intelligent AI interface for the pipeline control center. In Building C in the bottom of Koch Oil and Gas is where they have their pipeline control center, and I was sitting in there looking at a screen one day, and the fellow I was working for had to take off for a minute, so I was playing on one of the computers and started pulling up these screens, and I thought, well, this is odd. this looks like a layout of Alberta. And I'm sitting there looking at all of these gas plants, and the fellow comes back and he says, what you looking at? And I said, well, if I'm correct, I'm looking at the Alberta oil patch. I says, that looks like Bowden refinery and a couple other ones that I recognized on there. And he says, oh, it is. He said, we own all of the pipeline in North America. We have enough pipeline to go around the world about 1.5 times, and we own it through about 150 different subsidiaries that we also own. Well, I've never really cared which gas station I went into after that, because I know that it all comes from the same place, goes from the same place, pumped into the same pipeline, right back out of the same pipeline. It's a relatively inefficient system, because as they've monopolized and brought everything into a central place in order to control it, they've also gotten rid of a lot of the little support groups that used to be in all of these different independent little pipelines all over the place. So if they needed to respond in an emergency, they just wouldn't have the emergency teams to be able to respond to anything. And I realized at that point in time how everything was so incredibly monopolized. I read everything I could about the Koch family. They're related to Einstein. Einstein's grandmother was a Koch. These were Jews that came to North America and converted to Christianity. And I know Charles Koch's father was instrumental in starting the John Birch Society. And it's funny how these guys get inside of these organizations in order to tear them apart from the inside. Now, Koch not only controls all of the oil and gas in North America from that one building C at Koch Oil and Gas headquarters in Wichita, Kansas, which has got to be the freakiest place you ever been to in your life. You know, you get followed around the streets by these little flying bugs and all that other sort of stuff. There's more airports in Wichita, Kansas than any other place in the United States. Because all of the aerospace industries are down there and everything. I remember going on a little ride when I was there and going to this cairn that was right in the exact center of the United States. Thought that was kind of interesting, but I got followed by one of these little, they got some weird looking flying machines around there. And that was actually the place that I learned that it's that bat-winged jet, stealth bomber is actually an anti-grav device. I'm sitting there having lunch one afternoon in the foyer in Koch Oil and Gas, and this thing comes whipping along and it stops. And it stood there for like 15 minutes. I'm not kidding you. It never moved. And I'm sitting there looking at it, and then all of a sudden, bang, it blurted off like a bat out of hell. And I remember talking to a fellow afterwards, and he told me, he says, the leading edge is ionized, or something like that. However, that factors into it, which makes it some sort of propulsion for an anti-gravity device or something like that. So I did want to share this thing with you about the oil and gas industry. It is an absolute monopoly. They do buy up people's patents and inventions and everything else so that they can keep the human race under the gun, and they want them right there. You know, they're bringing out these new electric cars, but did you know that the first electric car went into production in 1820? If you get pictures of the 1903 World Fair in Chicago, you see it lit up like a Christmas tree, and people are actually driving around it in these little electrical cars. Yeah, I know. You get rid of this stuff and you never ever hear about it. It's like Nazi Germany during the war. Whenever they ran out of gasoline, they converted all of their vehicles to run on wood gas. And that's one thing that I've been playing with. The reason that I play with these little gasifier stoves and everything is because I want to convert my generator over to run on wood gas, and then I'll be totally independent of the system. Now, I do believe in free energy. The sun is 99.9% of the mass of our solar system, and the fierce photonic flux generated by the sun creates all of what we perceive to be reality. It creates all of life. They say there's no such thing as a free ride. Horse pucky. There's a free ride for everybody on the face of the earth, with the exception of the human race. Everything gets fed, all plants, everything gets fed for free. If we would quit with this monopoly stuff, quit allowing a few people just to control every aspect of our lives and everything else, all of this nonsense would stop. We could live in Eden, we could live in heaven, and we could leave the most beautiful, verdant paradise to our children. Oh, I'm out of my 10 minutes again, so that's my blurb on oil and gas. Peace, everybody. I love you. Take care.